Right, so on a number of fronts now, Israel are very much lost in the court of public opinion worldwide, but none not more so, arguably, as far as the UN aid agency UNRWA goes. And this is hardly a surprise, given that UNRWA stands in defiance of the eradication of the Palestinians, as many in Benjamin Netanyahu's far-right coalition government would very much like to see. As some of you will now be aware of if you've been following this business with UNRWA, Israel made some accusations against the agency that 12 of their 15,000 staff in Gaza, they employ 30,000 people globally, were working with Hamas on the night of October 7th. And as regular viewers of this channel will know, this has led to a number of countries choosing to defund the entirely aid money financed agency, all off the back of Israel's word. Honestly, if I had a bridge to sell some of these people, I would make a killing, wouldn't I? Because Israel's word isn't worth a bean. Long story short, long story being my video from the other day, do go and watch it, but after this one, Israel's accusations have fallen apart. Now only 4 people of those 12 actually being accused still, based on what evidence we don't know because nobody's seen it, and that's out of 15,000 people working for the agency in Gaza. Again, I remind you, such is the absolute ridiculousness of the defunding. But in light of more countries picking up where others won't, with greater donations, increased funding, Spain, New Zealand and now Malaysia are notable here, keeping UNRWA going at least a little longer, Israel has decided to dial things up a notch in its assault on an aid agency they see as being the last barrier to ridding land they want of its indigenous people. Right, so already the UN Relief and Works Agency for Palestinian Refugees, possibly better known to the world as UNRWA, had issued a statement due to the 16 wealthy countries that have cut funding in light of those 4, as things stand now, accusations of which Israel has still produced absolutely no evidence to back up, making those countries listening to Israel on this even bigger jokes than they were before. But with other nations increasing their donations, the agency, which has publicly said it won't be able to finance its operations beyond the end of this month, might just limp on a little bit longer. Now, Israel hate this agency because of the work they do, because of the people they help. Some 6 million Palestinians right now scattered across Palestine and surrounding countries. This agency has existed since 1949, since the Nakba, and have been ever since, such as the persecution gone on and ever since. But with the opportunity to take the Gaza Strip over, despite Benjamin Netanyahu's denials on such matters, there are those in his government who are demanding this, will accept nothing less. And so to keep himself in power, you can imagine what Netanyahu is saying publicly and what he actually does behind closed doors might well be 2 very different things. The trouble with Israel, though, is that there is this inherent arrogance at the top, and they keep feeling like they can tell the world their intentions and get away with it, that they can tell all without any repercussions. It's like the comic book villain revealing his plot before the heroes come in and stop them, isn't it? It's that kind of an action. They've done it all along, and they keep getting proved right on this, stupidly as well, as the US, the UK, the EU and plenty of others continue to support and supply them, despite confessing to wanting to seize the land, wanting to push these people out of Gaza, wanting to build new settlements there, and so on and so forth. So when it comes to UNRWA then, have they been saying that quiet part out loud again? Well, yes, it seems like they have. A member of Netanyahu's Likud party, British-born Fleur Hassan-Nahoum, born and raised in London and Gibraltar, who chose to emigrate to Israel in 2001, in her late 30s as it happened, and is now a member of parliament out there. You can only speculate the sort of person that must make her, given Israel appealed to her not only as somewhere to live, but to also represent. Well, she said the quiet part out loud when speaking to Kate Burley on Sky, because she said, the whole ethos of UNRWA since the beginning, since its inception in 1948, has been, let's keep the refugee crisis fresh. Let's give these refugees. You know, this is the only refugee problem that is inherited. We're in 5 generations now, and it's an inherited problem, and the result of that is essentially that they don't solve the problem, they just perpetuate it. So what you're basically saying then is that UNRWA have been a problem for you for decades, for Israel for decades, because they've been an obstacle to your ethnic cleansing? These people have become refugees in their own land. The land was not in the gift of the West, of the UK, to give to the Jewish people as per the Balfour Declaration. To refer to them as an inherited problem is to ignore the fact their lands were stolen from them. But of course, we're 5 generations on now, as she says. And with Israel refusing to accept the notion of a 2-state solution utterly now, publicly now, if they ever accepted the idea previously behind closed doors, That doesn't really make the Palestinians the problem then, does it? How dare she dehumanise these people? Many Israelis, I would imagine, are severely indoctrinated, especially those born and raised there, but her, well, she wasn't, so she knows damn well different. She's not alone, though. Israel's foreign minister, another member of Netanyahu's Likud party, he went to that settlement conference I spoke about in another video the other day, Israel Katz, he's called, tweeted out just yesterday that UNRWA, entangled with Hamas's terrorist activities in Gaza, perpetuates the false narrative of Palestinian refugees needing to return to Israel. We are actively working to disengage UNRWA from Gaza. They are a part of the problem and not a part of the solution. Saying the quiet part out even louder. So what are they going to do to force UNRWA out of Gaza then, Damo? Apart from making a mountain out of what might well be a non-existent molehill relating to these 4 UNRWA workers? Well, indeed. With donations having been increased from elsewhere in the world, which you might think would stymie efforts on Israel's behalf to do away with UNRWA, in actuality UNRWA are down some 75% of their budget, and unless reinstated they will still collapse. But unfortunately one of those hard-right, batshit coalition ministers Netanyahu went to get him back into power again, that I'd alluded to earlier, also happens to be the finance minister in Israel. Bezalel Smotrich. You can't even say his name without sneering, can you? It's one of those names. He's alleged to be behind a move which has seen at least one Israeli bank freeze UNRWA's accounts with them, citing unusual activity. Now, news of this bank's move was broken by Israeli centrist paper Haaretz last night. They wouldn't name the bank, but the Israeli evening tabloid Globes did, saying it was the bank Leumi. It's very sus, this, given the timing of it, isn't it? And does lend weight to the bank being lent on, with UNRWA's donations already now a fraction of what they were. Is Smotrich definitely involved? Well, if he isn't, he's certainly not shy about putting the boot in. In fact, he raised the stakes even further and has dragged accusations against a global charity into it all now as well. According to Israel's Channel 12, he's come out and said, Amnesty International hid UNRWA's involvement in the massacre from the political level. So Amnesty International, the human rights charity that documents and combats human rights abuses around the world, are now a target for Israel too? Well, I cannot imagine why. Well, one rather big reason might be that they are calling out the ones that should be suspending their actions, which isn't UNRWA, but is the very people still arming Israel in the midst of this ongoing genocide. And I don't doubt the fact that Amnesty International will be collecting evidence to hand over to the ICJ as per their provisional orders on preserving evidence. But one of their bigwigs, Agnes Callamard, Amnesty's Secretary General and a former UN Special Rapporteur on extrajudicial killings, so she knows her onions around a genocide, doesn't she? She said, some of the very governments that announced they will cut off funds to UNRWA over these allegations have, in the meantime, continued to arm Israeli forces, despite overwhelming evidence that these arms are used to commit war crimes and serious human rights violations. Rushing to freeze funds for humanitarian aid, based on allegations that are still being investigated, while refusing to even consider suspending support for the Israeli military, is a stark example of double standards. Instead of suspending vital funds to those in need, states should be working to halt arms transfers to Israel and Palestinian armed groups and pushing for an immediate and sustained ceasefire and full humanitarian access to help alleviate devastating suffering. Well, there's a burn. She's obviously right, though, isn't she? Reinforcing how backwards this entire UNRWA situation is, though, is the fact that the organisation, UNRWA, has just been nominated for a Nobel Peace Prize. Yes, the Israeli backing world is backing the defunding of an organisation operating in the middle of a genocide, on the word of those committing said genocide without having seen any evidence to back it up, to help those caught up in the crossfire to keep on living, even as that organisation is nominated for arguably the most prestigious peace prize on the planet. If ever there was a stop the world time I would want to get off moment, surely this is it. The nomination, incidentally, has come from Norway, one of their Labour Party MPs. They have a Labour Party. They've got one worthy of the name, unlike ours here in the UK. One of their MPs, Asmund Aukrust, he's called, I hope I said that right, said that he had nominated UNRWA for its long-term work to provide vital support to Palestine and the region in general. An awful lot of people around the world would be in firm agreement with that, as well as some other governments, if not others. Belgium, for instance, is one of those standing by UNRWA and coincidentally just had its own aid and redevelopment offices in Gaza destroyed shortly after announcing that. Coincidence? Well, see what you think. You can check out the details of that story in this video here next, and I'll hopefully catch you on the next vid. Cheers, folks.